I am Henry. Today we are going to start a new series in JavaScript, which will start from basics to advanced concepts. The first 10 episodes will be for the beginners. If you are a beginner, then this is the right time and the right place to start. As a part of this video, we are going to cover how browser works. If you want to become a front-end developer, it is necessary for you to understand how browser works because that's where your code is going to run. In this particular video, we are going to learn about different components of the browsers and how rendering engine works. Let's get started. Before getting to know about how browser works, it is necessary for you to understand the client-server communication because the browser's functionality is built on top of client-server communication. When you open a browser, your browser accesses a client and it tries to connect to a server which is in the remote location. If you consider this example, here the browser tries to connect to the web server for a request called page.html. Once the request reaches the web server tries to send the content as soon as possible. The content, if it is available in the server, then it will send the content. If it is not available, then it will send the appropriate error code. In this case, the error code is 404. Cool. So this is all about client-server communication. Now, let's get started with the different components of the browser. There are 7 different components of browser. One is user interface, networking, rendering engine, browser engine, JavaScript interpreter, UI backend, and data persistent module. When you open a browser, what are the things you're seeing in the browser is called user interface. The user interface will have a URL text box and you'll have a viewport where the content are rendered in the screen, and then you'll have some controls to go back and forward in the history. One of the important module in browser is networking. When the user types the URL and hit enter, it goes to the networking module. The networking module tries to connect to the server, which is in remote location, and it gets the HTML from the server in chunks of 8 KBs and gives to rendering engine. So here the rendering engine's part is to render the content which is coming from the remote server. We'll look into the rendering algorithm later, the process of the rendering in the later stages of this video. Now we are going to see what is browser engine. So the responsibility of the browser engine is to take care of the browser level functionalities. For example, you might be opening number of tabs in a browser, right? So those tabs has to be managed, and there are several other functionalities which has to be managed in the browser level. So those functionalities are taken care by browser engine. Now let's talk about persistence layer, which is data persistence layer. By the name itself, you can say it has to persist the data. So how are we going to persist the data? There are 4 different ways to do it. One is local storage, session storage, IndexedDB, and WebSQL. Based on your requirement, you can choose either one of it. Now we are going to talk about JavaScript interpreter. As you know, JavaScript is an interpreted language, which means that the high-level language which we are writing, it has to be converted to the bytecode which is understandable by the machine. So Chrome uses V8 engine for this interpreting purpose, and even the Node.js, which is a runtime environment outside of the browser, it uses V8 engine as well. So JavaScript interpreter's functionality is to interpret the JavaScript code which is in the high-level language to the bytecode. Now let's talk about UI backend. So the functionality or the responsibility of the UI backend is to draw the elements in the viewport. So once the HTML is passed, it has to be drawn in the viewport. So that particular work is taken care by UI backend. Now we have missed out one thing, which is the rendering engine part. Now let's talk about the rendering engine's work. So if you see this slide, there are 2 things. One is the HTML, another one is CSS. These 2 separate entities are passed separately. The HTML is passed to DOM tree. DOM tree is called document object model tree, and the CSS is passed to CSS object model tree. So these two separate trees will be combined to form a new tree called render tree. So the render tree will have a hierarchy of element which has to be drawn in the viewport, but it will not have the exact place where it has to be drawn in the viewport. If you see a browser, there will be x-axis and then y-axis. So we have to find out where exactly these element has to be drawn in the browser. That's why we have a process called layouting process. This layouting process will assign a particular position to each and every element. So once this layouting process is completed, the remaining functionality is to draw the elements in the web viewport. So that is taken care by the painting process. So this whole process is a gradual process, which means that it will not happen in one big step, but it will happen gradually, so that the user who is trying to view the screen, he will not see a lagging content. So if it is lagging, then it's a very bad user experience. So the browser tries to draw the content as soon as possible. This is all about rendering engine. Now let's have a quick recap of what we have learned in this tutorial. There are 7 different components in a browser, and the 7 different components are user interface, networking, rendering engine, browser engine, JavaScript interpreter, UI backend, data persistence. When you open a browser, whatever you're seeing in the screen is called user interface. It lets you to type the URL and you can view the content in the user interface. Networking lets you to get the HTML or CSS from the remote server, and it gives to the rendering engine. Rendering engine parses the HTML and CSS which came from remote server, and it will draw it in the viewport. Browser engine's functionality is to take care of the browser level functionality, for example, to manage tabs and all. And JavaScript interpreter, it interprets the JavaScript which you have written in the high level language to the byte level code. The purpose of UI backend, once the rendering engine parses and make the whole tree ready, it draws the content in the viewport. Data persistent modules functionality is to persist the data using local storage, session storage, IndexedDB, or WebSQL. Based on your requirement, you can choose either one of it. That's it for this video. We will be learning about what is JavaScript and the introduction to the JavaScript in the next video. See you in the next video, guys. If you really like my video, you can like and you can comment if you have any doubt, and you can always subscribe to my channel. I'll be posting a lot of new videos and new things in JavaScript. Thanks a lot for watching. See you in the next video. Bye.